Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This video uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're diving into, well, I guess diving into is kind of an appropriate metaphor, right? Given that we're talking about the Black Swan, the impact of the Highly Improbable by Nassim Taleb.
Yeah, I see what you did there.
It's a book that, well, I guess you could say kind of pulls back the curtain on these unpredictable events that, really shake things up.
The ones that seem to come out of nowhere, but have a huge GC impact.
Exactly.
And it's not just about recognizing these Black Swan events. It's about understanding how our minds are kind of wired to misunderstand them,
Right, like we're set up to make these flawed predictions.
Yeah, exactly.
So Taleb, he uses this, it's a pretty simple analogy, but it really gets the point across. Imagine a turkey happily going about its daily routine on a farm. Each day kind of reinforces this belief that, life is safe and predictable. And then Thanksgiving arrives.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that we can't just rely on past experiences to predict the future, especially in a world that's vulnerable to these massive, unforeseen events. Like, think about the 2008 financial crisis. It caught so many experts off guard.
Right, like completely blindsided.
Totally. It really exposed the limitations of just relying on historical data.
It's kind of chilling parallel. You think about it. It's easy to, get lulled into this false sense of security when things have been going well for a while.
Absolutely. And this ties into another key concept that Taleb explores, the narrative fallacy.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that one.
Well, basically, our brains crave stories, right? We want explanations, even for random events.
We want to connect the dots.
Yeah, we try to create a narrative that makes us feel like we understand things, like we have some control over what happens.
Even when we really don't.
Exactly.
So it's like we're imposing order on chaos, even if it's not really there.
You got it. And this can be incredibly misleading, especially in fields like, financial markets or geopolitical forecasting. Places where these Black Swan events can really overturn our predictions.
Our carefully constructed predictions, yeah.
Exactly.
So we're constantly trying to make sense of the world, but sometimes that very act of sense-making can blind us to the things we can't predict.
That's a great way to put it.
Taleb also talks about something called the silent evidence problem?
Oh, right.
Yeah, which seems to kind of compound this issue.
It does. Basically, he's saying that we tend to focus on the survivors, the success stories, but we neglect the failures, the ones who didn't make it.
It's like a survivorship bias.
Exactly.
We see the people who won the lottery, but not the millions who didn't.
Right, and that distorts our perception of risk.
It makes things seem less risky than they actually are.
Yeah, and it can lead us to overestimate our own abilities.
So, even if we're aware of these biases, it's still easy to fall into those traps.
It is. It's human nature.
So where do the so-called experts fit into all of this? Aren't they supposed to be the ones who can, see these things coming?
That's where it gets really interesting. Taleb argues that even specialists often overestimate their predictive abilities, especially in fields that are prone to Black Swan events.
You mean even with all their knowledge and experience, they can be just as blindsided as anyone else?
In many cases, yes.
Wow, okay.
There's a researcher named Philip Tetlock. He's done some fascinating work on expert predictions, and his research shows that in these fields where Black swans are common, these so-called experts often perform no better than chance.
No better than chance. So it's almost like flipping a coin.
Pretty much.
So if even the experts can't see these events coming, what hope do the rest of us have?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's not about predicting the unpredictable. It's about shifting our mindset to acknowledge the limitations of our knowledge and building more robustness into our systems and strategies.
Robustness. Okay, now that sounds like a good place to pick up in part 2 of our deep dive. We'll delve deeper into how we can navigate this world that's shaped by these Black Swan events. So be sure to join us for the next part of our exploration of the Black Swan, the impact of the highly improbable. See you there. Okay, so last time we left off talking about robustness, this idea of building systems and strategies that can actually benefit from unexpected events. It's almost like turning those Black Swans into, beautiful swans, right?
Right, yeah. Instead of fearing those unpredictable events, we can learn to kind of roll with the punches and maybe even come out stronger on the other side.
I like that. But how do we practically apply that? Where do we even begin?
Well, Taleb suggests we look to Mother Nature. She's the ultimate expert in dealing with uncertainty, right? Think about it. Natural systems have been evolving for billions of years, adapting and thriving amidst constant change and disruption.
Yeah, that's true. Nature's pretty good at handling curveballs. Yeah.
Exactly. Take forests, for instance. They've endured countless wildfires, storms, even ice ages. And some tree species actually need fire to reproduce.
Wow, so the very thing that seems destructive is actually essential for their survival.
It is. And that same principle applies to us too. Taleb refers to it as anti-fragility, this ability to actually benefit from stressors, from disorder. It's a pretty powerful idea.
Okay, but how do I, actually apply this to my own life? Give me a real-world example.
Sure. Let's take something like our approach to, say, diet and exercise. You know how a lot of people get stuck in these rigid routines, always eating the same foods, doing the same workouts?
Yeah, guilty as charged.
Well, incorporating some variability can actually make us more resilient.
So you're saying I should be switching things up?
It's a good idea. By varying your food choices, your workouts, you expose your body to a wider range of stimuli. And ultimately, that makes you stronger.
So a little randomness in my routine could actually be a good thing.
It can be, yeah. And this goes beyond just physical health. Stepping outside your comfort zone, trying new things, embracing the unknown, even in small ways, all of this builds your adaptability. It prepares you for those unexpected challenges.
It's like getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and recognizing that failure is a stepping stone of growth. It's all part of the process.
Okay, so this is quite a shift in perspective. I usually try to avoid things that seem unpredictable or risky, but maybe that's limiting my potential.
It might be, yeah. We can't eliminate Black Swan events entirely, but we can change how we approach them. We can move from a place of fear to a place of preparation.
Preparation. Okay, I like that. So what you're saying is instead of trying to predict and prevent, which is impossible anyway, we should be focused on building our capacity to handle the unexpected.
Exactly. That's the key takeaway. Shifting our mindset from predicting and preventing to preparing and adapting.
Wow, this has been incredibly helpful. It's like seeing the world through a whole new lens. But I'm also curious about the bigger picture. How does all of this play out on a larger scale? How do we build a more robust society, a more anti-fragile society?
That's a great question, and that's actually something we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive. We're going to explore some of Taleb's specific recommendations for creating a Black Swan robust world, including this idea of the fourth quadrant we touched on earlier.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into the Black Swan. We've talked about those mental traps like the narrative fallacy and that silent evidence problem. We've even explored this idea of becoming anti-fragile, like learning to actually benefit from those unpredictable events. But you mentioned something called the fourth quadrant earlier. I'm still a little fuzzy on what exactly that is.
Yeah, so the fourth quadrant is basically a framework that Taleb created to help us make smarter decisions when we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. He argues that not all problems are created equal.
Okay, that makes sense. So how does he categorize these problems?
Well, he uses this 2x2 matrix. On one axis, you've got the predictability of outcomes, so how well we can actually predict what's going to happen. And on the other axis, you have a potential impact of those outcomes.
So like how big of a deal it would be if things went wrong or...
Right. Exactly. And so the fourth quadrant is where things get really interesting. It's that area where the predictability is low, but the potential impact is high.
Sounds kind of dangerous.
It can be. It's the territory of Black Swan events, where traditional ways of forecasting and predicting, they just don't really work.
Can you give me an example of what kind of problem would fall into this fourth quadrant?
Sure. Think about, like, the 2008 financial crisis. Very few people saw that coming, and it had a massive global impact, right? Or even the COVID-19 pandemic, another example of a black swan that really shook things up.
Right, yeah. Nobody predicted those events, and the consequences were huge. Okay, so how does understanding this fourth quadrant help us make better decisions?
Well, it's like a warning sign. It tells us that in these situations where the stakes are high and we can't really predict what's going to happen, we need to be extra cautious.
So basically acknowledge that we don't know everything and don't be overconfident.
Right. Don't get caught off guard. It's about understanding the limits of our knowledge and being prepared for the unexpected.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together now. Instead of trying to predict those unpredictable events, which is impossible anyway, we should be focused on making our systems, our strategies, even our own mindsets more robust.
Exactly. It's not about avoiding risk altogether, but about managing it in a smarter way, recognizing that those black swan events, they're a part of life.
Earlier, you mentioned that Taleb outlined some specific principles for building this kind of robust society. What are some of those?
Well, he has 10 principles in total, but some of the key ones are diversification, favoring simplicity, and learning from Mother Nature.
We've talked about that idea of looking to nature as a model for resilience before. It's amazing how those natural systems have evolved to handle all sorts of disruptions.
Absolutely. Nature's been dealing with black swan events for billions of years. We can learn a lot from studying how she does it.
Okay, so diversification, simplicity, and learning from nature. Anything else we should keep in mind?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from the Black Swan is this shift in mindset. It's about moving away from this illusion of control, this idea that we can predict and prevent everything.
And instead, embrace the uncertainty, be prepared for those unexpected events, and maybe even find a way to benefit from them.
Exactly. Become anti-fragile. That's the key.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating journey into the world of black swans. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and for breaking down these complex ideas in such an accessible way.
It's been my pleasure.
For everyone listening, I highly recommend checking out The Black Swan for yourselves. It's a book that will challenge your assumptions and maybe even change the way you see the world. You can find a link to purchase the book in the description below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to Mindful Moments for more insightful content like this. Thanks for joining us.